к запуску трансляции и к началу мероприятия. Алло. Да? Я еще раз повторю, когда появится Аксаков, сразу мне скажите, пожалуйста, об этом на зуме. Да, спасибо. Могу начинать? Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Приветствуем вас на Столыпинском форуме. Сегодня у нас идет уже второй день мероприятий форума, и секция наша называется «Крауд-инвестиции и цифровые финансовые активы». В этом году у нас вступило в силу новое законодательство о крауд-инвестициях. Был принят новый специальный закон, который перезагрузил фактически всю деятельность этой сферы. И новое законодательство по цифровым финансовым активам. Сейчас достаточно большая работа проводится со стороны Центрального банка Российской Федерации по урегулированию уже конкретных вещей, связанных с правоприменительной практикой в этой сфере. Сегодня спикеров мы пригласили достаточно известных практиков. Представлю присутствующих у нас на сцене. Илья Димитров – это наш фактически ключевой человек в Институте уполномоченных по защите прав предпринимателей, омбудсмен по цифровой экономике, исполнительный директор Ассоциации электронных цифровых площадок. К нам подключится по Zoom Анатолий Геннадьевич Аксаков, председатель комитета по финансовым рынкам Государственной Думы Российской Федерации, Армен Грайрович Минасян на сцене, это партнер холдинга «Поток», Борис Борисович Славин, финансовый университет, научный руководитель факультета информационных технологий и анализа больших данных, и Кирилл Петрович Косминский, исполнительный директор Ассоциации операторов инвестиционных платформ. С нами также на связи наши иностранные коллеги, господин Ингус Линскевич, генеральный директор Wise Fund, эстонская платформа, которая работает на территории всего Европейского Союза, Эппи Людвигс, основатель, генеральный директор Crowdsourcing Week, и Юрий Бажор, Юрий Анатольевич Бажор, руководитель экспертной группы управления финансовой доступностью
Department of the Consumer Rights Protection and Financial Service Availability Unit of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation, one of the key departments of the Central Bank responsible for the finance to be available and to avoid any violation of the financial rights. We have Mr. Verdiaev, Mr. Sheltsin, Director of Digital Platforms Autonomous Non-Commercial Organization, and Ms. Avakian, Yegorov, Afanasyev, Paginsky, and partner. Let's start with the question to Ilya. As a representative of one of the watchdogs, our so-called Special Institute to protect the rights responsible for the whole development of the digital economy, from your perspective, what are the main areas of this public policy for the digital economy to operate? And the Russian economy should be as much attractive as it's possible for the people to come to our country, so legal entities to be located and registered in Russia, to raise investment from abroad, and to avoid the brain drain from Russia. So please take the floor.
Слышно?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the floor. The question's quite simple on the one hand and very complicated on the other hand. As of today, we have a new law, which is a good thing, but in our mindset, we have a chaos in terms of terms, what the digital economy is, what the conventional economy is, and so on and so forth. Usually, participating in other forums, I start my speech with identifying what the digital economy is, to understand what we are talking about that. And only after that we are ready to start our discussion. I'm not going to torture you, but the digital economy is a forecast model of economy when we shift from one model of management to another model of management. And we start managing economy through forecasting. This is not the set of tools and we have. 3 years ago, we saw the hype of blockchain when everybody was crazy about the blockchain, Bitcoin, when people were said that it was a stack technology, it was just hype. And we told the people to understand what the terms were about, what the technology was required. The second issue we have. So when you understand what we're talking about, then there is a question of regulation. If we don't understand what we're going to regulate, a new environment particularly, of course you can have any law, to regulate the clouds in the sky, but there will be no result at all, no outcome. There is another case when the state tries to undertake the function of the IT company. If we want our country to develop, so the country is to set the environment, to set the set of the rules, to create the very attractive environment. We are very positive about a new law, but as for the law enforcement, only time will show. On the one hand, it's a very complicated issue. On the other hand, as I have said, it is a very simple question. First, we need to listen to the people engaged in this area from the perspective of the finance, whether the current law helps them, whether it doesn't. Concluding my speech, I'm going to give an example. Discussing in the State Duma of Russia 2 years ago the question connected with the regulation of the financial technologies. We asked the central bank for them not to regulate, but to create a so-called legal sandbox based on the Swiss example, not to kill the technologies, but to take a look at the technologies, whether it operates, whether it doesn't operate, and then to try to regulate. That was the first point, and it was implemented. The second point, which we mentioned then, in terms of the regulation of the cryptocurrency, was based on the following thing. We looked into the best practices, and we understood that it was impossible to prohibit something, to let everything go as it goes, was not the case as well. And the smart regulation was proposed. Smart regulation means several stages. The first stage is to create the legal framework, but within this legal framework, apart from these digital assets, there was supposed to be a stock exchange. But the stock exchange didn't appear, so the Ministry of Finance started to look into the current market as the former market. So they looked at it as a conventional stock exchange. Therefore, the traders of the stock exchange, you should be certified, you should have a license, and of course, it was not absolutely appropriate for the situation. So when the law was adopted, there was no any mention about the stock exchange. So I didn't understand how they managed to kill everything at the very infant stage. Stolypin Club is about the development, it's about the smart regulation. What do the digital platforms lack in terms of the legal framework? Probably it's up to you to decide. And then we need to understand whether we can amend that or not. Sometimes the law is created by the experts who don't understand about the area at all. Sometimes IT companies that they are just over everybody. You know, the regulators need to transform, the watchdogs need to transform, of course, but they shouldn't just cater to all the demands of the IT companies, on the other hand. Thank you very much for your input. Talking about digital future, talking about the digital financial assets that we need to aim at a particular goal, we do understand that the stock exchange you've mentioned, it has been operating. CEDAR is one of the greatest investment marketplace. They have their own stock exchange. They raised funds for Revolut, which is a payment system, the value of which amounts to several billions. And so the asset is within this investment platform. You can buy, you can sell it. As far as I know, in order to participate in this platform, you just need to tick the box that I undertake the risks, I understand the risks, and to accept the proposal. That's what we are striving for, but there is still 3 to 4 years. Arman, you represent one of the biggest platforms in Russia. Sberbank is going to catch up with your Potok. It used to be Alpha Potok. You are within the 7 platforms list, which have the approval to conduct activity in this area. So can you share with us how you responded to a new law being a platform, whether it has changed your activity? As far as I know, you have about 4 to 5 years experience. So what are the major products and areas of development in your platform? There are 9 platforms as of today. There is a constant upgrading. Can I have my presentation? And I'm going to speak at length about this area. I'm going to brief you on our company. So our department emerged in Alpha Bank 2015-2016. It was a separate legal entity. October 2019, 40% of the company turned into private investors' portfolio. So the department was not supposed to develop as a part of the ecosystem. So we are open to cooperation with platforms, with the banks, and this is the key message of our area. As for the priorities, what we focus on, this is the finances and funding to micro and small businesses, as crowd lending and crowdfunding, due to historical reasons, peculiarities of the banking regulation, is beyond the market. So the micro businesses and small businesses have some issues to raise finances from the bank. Of course, there are SMEs, is a clear definition, but we do not look into the depth. We do not understand that there are many different types of SMEs. What is the Potok right now about? This is the biggest platform on the market. We have 30,000 registered users in our platform. About 1.9 billion of loans in micro segment. As for the team, of course, there is an extreme that the financial technology projects, they think that everything is so simple. It's not the case, actually. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later. As the crowd lending platform, crowd investment team should consist of people with banking background, with banking experience at the credit risks, what the crowd lending platform is based on. And the simultaneous process is the automation of the processes, as you shouldn't have a carbon copy, mini carbon copy of the bank, including 150 to 160 people. Of course, there are some projects like that, but it leads to nowhere. So the first is the expertise in finance and risks, and the second is technology. They should go hand by hand. They shouldn't exist separately. The crowdfinancing market in Russia just is about 5 years old. Over these 5 years, we have seen different players emerging and disappearing due to these reasons. So some of them didn't have IT expertise, some of them didn't have financial and risk expertise, so there was a high rate of default in companies. A couple of words about the trends in crowdfinancing as of today. Based on our experience, we shape the strategy. What do we have right now? We have private investors. We see legal entities, institutional investors coming, and just businesses. In terms of the businesses, can be microfinance, financial companies, there can be syndicated loans from the bank due to different reasons, to the lack of expertise, due to the lack of the products on the market. As I've already mentioned, the banks are reluctant to give loans to micro businesses. As for the investment tools, there is a major product, the loans to micro and small businesses. Therefore, we're trying to develop this loan line. There can be revolving credit line. For example, the state contract beyond the banks, terrain, factoring, and leasing products are very relevant as of today as well. As for the businesses we work with, I'm going to reiterate, this is micro and small businesses. On this slide, this is the official figures. We have 200,000 companies within these 5 years. It's a huge amount. These 200,000 companies have scored in our platform 10,000 of companies which had the access to the to funds at least once. 10% of the retention in crowd lending. This is the specifics, not only Alpha Potok. This is the specifics of the platform. This is a very high figure. When a business applies and gets the loan, it understands it's a very convenient one. So the major advantage of crowdsourcing is the speed and convenience in terms of the application forms. You don't need to go to the bank and to file a lot of documents. Before, many platforms didn't require any collateral at all. It was not right. Right now, thanks to automation, there are different tools to cover your loan. This is the letter of attorney on the one hand, or the requirement for the bank. Have the right to require reimbursement for a particular contract. For example, a bank executes this order, so our investors have additional protection, have additional security. 30% of our clients, wholesale trading, then about 20% of retail, and then logistics and transport area. The same segments, the same businesses which do not go to the bank and do not apply for the loan. It's a very interesting slide, and I'd like to elaborate on that. So the profile of the investor, who invests in crowd lending platforms, we have made research over 10,000 active investors, the biggest number of investors on the market, people who invest on a daily basis. At this breakdown, we can see 85% are males, 15% of females. About 40% of them are the people who live in Moscow. As for the age breakdown, a major part of the people is within 25 to 45 years old. But if you look at the breakdown over the course of time, we can see that the millennials amount, people from 18 to 30, is growing. There is a trend to lower amount of investment. This is the question about the qualified and non-qualified investors. But at the same time, the amount of these people is going up, and the average income, based on our research, is from 50 to 100,000 rubles. But we can see that youngsters tend to understand that the money should give return. So investment is not about investing only huge amounts of money. They try to invest another big amount of money. The entry point is 10,000 rubles. That's what they do. And, you know, I like these dynamics, particularly watching these investors, and I like watching them trying to understand what is happening. You know, it's kind of a new fashion. It's absolutely new for them, but they're trying to understand, to look into that. So what should we understand? What conclusions and findings should we make? Young investors look at the project, and their requirements for the financial technologies projects are a little bit different. Unlike conventional investors, qualified investors who have got used to understand the projects in detail, to ask additional questions, who require the investment manager. Young investors are different. They say, I'm not interested in that. Give me a tool, give me a service for me to have passive investment, to get appropriate return. They don't want to look into the projects. They don't want to look at them in detail. So they want to have a very good analysis and assessment from the platform in terms of risks and finance risk. We try different diversification types of the portfolio, and we believe that the diversification in 50 different projects with RAR of 20% is the appropriate one. When we have an investor coming into our platform, he has, for example, 20,000 rubles as an entry point. These 20,000 rubles will be distributed in 50 loans, and the person can have the function of reinvestment. So when the money is paid back, it can be automatically invested into different other projects. Overall, about the forecast of crowdfinancing in Russia, we have the federal law regulating this area right now. You know, to be very careful in terms of analyzing the law, it's quite liberal. So we, being a huge player on the market, we see only benefits. So before the law, even within this sandbox, there were some projects, dozens of projects, which had a very high rate of default on payments. And on the website, you just can see 0.1%, 1%. So I don't think that that was deliberately done, but people overestimated the opportunities of automation. So this negative message was relevant for the whole market. And there were some fraud projects like Cashberry, which positioned themselves as a crowdfinancing. Now those requirements stipulated in the federal law, they just do not allow them to enter the market at all. Of course, it's going to be very detrimental to ambitious young startups, as there are some requirements for the charter capital, a very complicated system, but that's not that important. Another benefit of the federal law is that the big players, particularly Sberbank, bank and other banks try to enter the market, because whenever there is a lack of the law, the big companies, the big banks, were not ready to enter the market at all. They couldn't assess the risks. But for right now, all the new platforms emerging on the market actually very linked to the banks. Some are developed under the auspices of these banks and microfinancial companies. The only question to discuss is the segregation into the qualified and non-qualified investors. From our experience, the biggest part of investors, of young investors with small amount of investments, they have less than 600,000 rubles per year of investment. And the second group consists of those who are qualified investors according to all the formal requirements. And the players understand that the retail investors will probably not scale up. And you cannot just turn 20 billion into 200 billion. Therefore, they are trying to engage institutional investors in these stories. Mutual funds, macro-financial companies, ETFs, and so on and so forth. This is the major message I wanted to give. May I have one question to you and to the rest? You talked about the regulation issue, but there is another very interesting cost of money point. So does the key rate of the central bank and the cost of money have influence on you as you're part of the global system? And in this case, how will it impact the cost of money set by the central bank, as we have been discussing it for a long time? So what is the cost of the money if the key rate is lower, so we have higher liquidity, and otherwise in a different case? One of the reasons as micro and small businesses are major lenders, as we have expensive money. But the money will be expensive on our platform. But there is kind of a minimum which investors is ready to invest for. So crowd investment should be understood. Crowd investment is a high-risk investment. In any case, if the rate is going to be below 15%, this is not going to be a case at all. So if you look at our product line, from 17 to 25% of return, this is very, very huge for mid-sized business. When the key rate goes down, this is much better for us, as we can see more and more investors coming to our platforms, to alternative investment tools. Let's get back to our timing. We have very harsh timing. If we are going to talk about different things at length, we're not going to have enough time for our colleagues. We have Inkus Linkevich, who is a citizen of Latvia, who started and decided to create the platform European in European Union on the financial digital assets and the crowd investment, which is one of the biggest and most interesting solutions. As we have heard from Armen, there are some problems connected with the fact that the companies are searching for the money and cannot get the money from the bank. In European Union, there is not the case, as the bank loans are huge and the rates are very close to zero. So what is the main impetus, for the main driver for investors in the European Union? What was the reason for you to open your own crowd investment platform, not in Latvia, but in Estonia? So, good afternoon, can I be heard? I'm going to share the European experience. Armen, brilliant speech, everything is clear, everything is quite familiar. I'm not going to agree with you. To get the funds in for small business is not that easy, as you have mentioned. Of course, there are some support measures in different countries,
If you have an ambitious idea, and unless you have some good background, solid background, it is quite difficult to obtain funding, even if you are ready to pay more. But here, crowdfunding platforms come into play. That in most countries of Europe currently are not yet regulated. Since 2014, the EU started adopting some of the measures and guidelines and directives, and they are ready to pursue with a pan-EU regulation, but still it has been stalled at this point of time for 6 years. Though it would be easier to open this platform, establish one to fund small and medium enterprises and attract money from individuals. For example, our average German clients could receive a rate of 1 or 0.5% of a deposit rate, but if they invest in a crowdfunding platform, the return may be as high as 20%. And some of the people take a credit card with a bank at 5% and invest that money into a crowdfunding platform. Well, responding to the question whether it will be a substitute for the ordinary funding, I don't think so, because banks sit on top of huge amounts of money and they have huge flows that they manage. The individuals can hardly compete with banks. It would take decades for them to accumulate commensurate funding. But anyway, those who are rejected by banks may resort to crowdfunding. I see very good potential in crowdfunding investments, because that would propel countries' economies. If someone wants to roll out a service or a product, added value is created. Investors would have their returns, and besides, the common good is there, the economy would grow. But definitely it's fraught with huge risks of arrears and non-payments. At the end of the day, all of that is now resulting much more complicated. And during the pandemic, I made note that all the lending sources worldwide stopped issuing loans, and the crowd investing was the only resort available to businesses. They could place applications and receive funding. For example, the Irish Links Finance saw their lending flow go up, and many of the businesses received help. Definitely, there was some governmental help and support lended to them. As far as our experience is concerned, well, yet we are lacking regulation at this point of time, and probably this is why, inter alia, why I have been able to open a business, and I don't have to comply with harsh and tough conditions, and I can have higher rates. And in the first 6 months, I had the turnover of 3.5 million. And the most difficult thing was to start cooperating with banks, because European banks are kinda wary of crowdfunding platforms. Some of them approve crowd investments and provide this service, this stream of business, but the costs would be higher and the platforms would have definitely very good cash flows. What played into my hands was the digital banks that are quite swift in moving funds around. If I had turned to big banks only, I wouldn't have been able to scale my business up. I resorted to other sources, and I only filed an application to the financial regulator of Estonia, and they told me that I could start working and lend to enterprises. What else can I tell you? Anyway, regulation probably should be there at a certain point of time, but there should be some landscape and conditions for platforms to avoid fraud and money theft. And we should accumulate the expertise. At the end of the day, so that average investors be able to see a review by platforms of all the inspections they went through, and platforms should have a financial analyst, a lawyer, a banking professional on payroll, and they are supposed to provide a review and for the investors to make up their mind whether to put up money or not. For investors, that would be a nice source of passive income, which is touted as a concept now worldwide. And there's a host of people with free and spare funds, and in case you invest these funds into other companies that may derive benefit for the economy. You shouldn't store your money on the pillow. If you invest your money, added value is created. And it is like this, more or less. Ingus, thank you very much. It has been of huge interest. The treatment of yours, like you applied to the Central Bank, the Russian Federation, and you just received a go-ahead. This is probably indicative, because Estonia has been ranking on top of different banking ratings. Yes, Estonia is an open nation. I now am in Latvia, and I have an electronic ID, and I don't need to go anywhere. So it's all remote. And this is why I opted for Estonia. If I had opted for Latvia, I probably would have some complications. I have some remote clients, and I received inquiries from Latvian regulators, and they asked many more questions than the Estonians. In Estonia, it's much more lenient, in a friendly way, so to say, and it was not mandatory quite often. So Estonia is a very good jurisdiction of how the digital world may may fit in the big finance. Thank you for participating. Thank you for speaking. We also have Yuri Bajor, head of expert group of Central Bank, one of the key developers of the current regulation, in charge of all the regulatory products by Central Bank. The question to you is as follows. It is common knowledge that the ICO and cryptocurrencies brought to the fore the issue of crowd investments, because there was a lot of cryptocurrencies projects that fizzled out and ended in nothing. Only quite few became successful. So what is the crowd investment concept? Is it about money? And what the risks for the financial services markets and investors may be? Thank you so much, Leonid. You introduced me as being in charge of the central bank's policies a while. Why do I have this red face in the screen? No, my face is of different color. As a matter of fact, actually, we have a huge team in the central bank that are in charge of the regulation. There are some of the departments dealing with supervision. Others are in charge of regulation. But I participated in this team that designed Federal Law 259. But I'm quite cautious about cryptocurrencies. I remember like a couple of years ago, representatives of some of the cryptocurrencies said that cryptocurrencies would have greater capitalization than Visa and MasterCard put together. And quite shortly, we all will switch to cryptocurrencies. But you know, at the end of the day, ICOs, most of the ICOs became a flop. It's like the Dutch tulip fever, a classical bubble with low qualified investors trying to put up their money in that, and most of them lost their money. But let's move towards the business dimension. The law is about regulating funding businesses, and those who provide funding are either individual entrepreneurs or legal entities. It is done for the sake of small and medium enterprises, and the new technology allows to expand the funding resources available to them. If entrepreneurs have salient ideas and they can build their case and prove their case, they may receive funds from venture capitalists and business angels. For example, the instance of Zoom lifted off and fired ahead, and now everybody has started using that. But the law is not about this. The law is about giving the SMEs a chance to attract money at early stages. So, most importantly, we have some promise, some future. Like after the first stage of Friends and Family is through, they come up with a business plan and they need money. They have the first prototypes, and their company has been operating for a couple of months only. They would not be able to get banking or microfinance loans. And at this point of time, it would be good to turn to people, but soft skills are needed. You need to present your project, to flaunt it, so that people have faith in you. And crowdfunding is useful in this case. And all the colleagues represented here, like Sberbank and others, know that quite well. We have been monitoring the market for 3 to 4 years, and we saw lots of cases with very bright entrepreneurs, but they had failed to calculate their business cases and reckoned them properly, and they had huge defaults and left the market. But we hope that the law that we drafted is based on principles, not on rules.
Базовый принцип следующий. Максимальная открытость. То есть платформа рассказывает о себе, рассказывает о проектах. Второе — это использование номинальных счетов. То есть, что бы ни было с платформой, пропала она, обанкротилась, завтра исчезла, номинальный счет позволяет сохранить деньги инвесторам и деньги лиц, привлекающих инвестиции. Тоже очень важно. Вот. И третий принцип, который мы всячески тоже продвигаем, это защита неквалифицированных инвесторов. В законе описано, что инвестор неквалифицированный не может вложить более 600 тысяч рублей в течение календарного года. Но я бы хотел привлечь еще внимание к такому новому инструменту, как утилитарные цифровые права. И это вот тот момент, который может быть использован и на начальных этапах, когда есть бизнес-модель уже, и на этапах более позднего развития. Ну, например, там вы решили построить, я не знаю, там, небольшой заводик по производству сахара. У вас есть деньги, там какие-то на начальный запуск, но немного. Вы выходите в регионе через краудфандинговую площадку, выпускаете утилитарные цифровые права, ну, скажем, там на килограмм или на тонну, или там на состав сахара. Вот, эти права вы продаете через площадку. Вы получаете деньги на развитие, вы получаете не такую высокую долговую нагрузку. При этом, как бы, прошел год, вы построили завод, вы выпустили этот сахар, можете его отдать людям, или можете, например, инвестор может получить его, продать, или вернуть ему деньги. Фактически получится краудлендинг. Но вы получили то, о чем мечтает предприниматель. Вы получили средства на развитие, вы получили некий рынок сбыта в будущем, вот, и вы получили возможность развиваться. И вот это идеально дают утилитарные цифровые права. То есть они позволяют полностью вот эту ситуацию формально оформить, получить права, площадка вам поможет с точки зрения их выпуска и дальнейшей с ними работы, и это хорошая вещь. Теперь дальше вы с тем же сахаром, вы действительно получилось, подгрузили там первые там, составы этого сахара, договорились с крупным покупателем, и вам нужны оборотные средства. И тут уже возникает схема окофакторинговая, околофакторинговая, которую тоже можно делать через площадку. Можно брать, например, классический пример, когда вы берете средства под уже поставленный сахар, вот, и в рамках будущих, или берете в рамках будущих поставок. И все это дело достаточно хорошо может вам дать источники финансирования, при этом не особо создавая нагрузку на бизнес. Ну, если брать, опять же, формально, я посмотрю в закон утилитарные цифровые права, что такое? Право требует передачи вещи, право требует передачи исключительных прав интеллектуальной собственности. Тем самым вы сможете и интеллектуальные вещи, там, ноу-хау, какую-то программу, что-то еще продавать. И право требовать выполнения работы или оказания услуг. Вы можете через площадку, например, попросить, чтобы вам построили, например, спортивную площадку возле вашего дома, и это фактически вы получите услугу. Вы не станете собственником этой площадки, вы получите, соответственно, возможность ей пользоваться. То есть этот закон, на самом деле, он настроен на малый и средний бизнес, на ранний и средний, на начальных этапах его развития. Соответственно, если посмотреть, когда уже для начинающих предпринимателей есть площадки, есть хорошие площадки, которые уже развились. Действительно, 9 площадок на сегодня вошло в реестр. Единственное, этот рынок, конечно, как и всякий, он имеет, обладает повышенными рисками. Естественно, для того, чтобы инвестировать, нужно понимать, куда инвестировать. И в этом плане положение закона, конечно, они предписывают площадки. Не рекомендуют, а предписывают полностью раскрывать информацию о бизнес-проекте участникам площадки. Тоже важно. Это не широкое распространение всем. А этот человек пришел на площадку, зарегистрировался и получил информацию о тех проектах, куда он может инвестировать. При этом, значит, неквалифицированные инвесторы защищены законом, я уже сказал. У квалифицированных инвесторов есть все инструменты для возможности развития. Номинальный счет позволит легко отследить движение денег, и поэтому требования к капиталу достаточно малы, и для финансовых посредников это такой самый, наверное, минимальный лайт-режим для входа. Соответственно, если инвестируете, завершая, инвесторы, если вы инвестируете, учитываете риски, оцениваете проекты, для того, чтобы инвестировать, необходимо разбираться в том, куда вы инвестируете.
Probably you should know where you put up your money in, and you should use only those platforms that are on the roster of the central bank. It's on our website available. And be a responsible investor. As you will invest your money, you should be knowledgeable about the return guarantees, and you should know where you are heading. So at the end of the day, in a nutshell, I think it's a promising sector. I wish all most colleagues, every success, it's a good thing that we have been have seen the grace period extended, and I hope that we'll see considerable growth in this whole coming year remaining, and I hope it's going to benefit the business and will not see the emergence of murky schemes. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. We appreciate cooperation with your service, with your division. Now we have been doing huge work to support business on loans, and this is headed by Mr. Mamuta. And we have to speed up as we are moving behind schedule. Yelena Georgievna, a couple of words on how you assess the current regulation and where we should move ahead.
Ну, будем честны, общероссийскую. Уважаемые коллеги, ну, в данном случае у меня такая немножко сложная задача. Непосредственно после принятия закона о цифровых финансовых активах и прошедшего только что новостей об изменениях закона о цифровых финансовых активах сказать, что я испытываю цифровой, а особенно криптооптимизм, невозможно. Я абсолютно согласна, когда мы начинали обсуждать криптовалюты, мы говорили о разумном регулировании. Разумное регулирование не предполагает заливание поляны напалмом, а потом удивление, что на этой поляне ничего не растет. Сегодня в области цифровых финансовых активов мы видим два тренда. Первый тренд – мы хотим все урегулировать в законе. Мы единственная уникальная юрисдикция, у которой есть гражданско-правовое регулирование на уровне Гражданского кодекса цифровых финансовых активов, но будем честны, не скажу, рынка нет совсем, испытываю уважение к уважаемому спикеру в том числе, но рынок, мягко сказать, достаточно в слабо развитом состоянии. Все остальные развитые цифровые юрисдикции, рынок есть, законов нет. Достаточно подзаконных актов и правоприменительной практики. И то, что сегодня делает Центральный банк России, то, что сегодня делает Министерство финансов в области тотального запрета любой криптоактивности, превращение Российской Федерации из криптонейтральной страны в страну полного криптопессимизма в условиях тотальных, еще к тому же экономических санкций, вызывает глобальное недоумение. Ведь мы даже не Китай, который, да, ввел запрет, но что делает Китай? Китай изучает проблему и выстраивает государственную систему криптоактивности, строит позицию на страшные слова на криптофиате и пытается создать криптоплатформу под государственным регулированием. Мы этого не делаем. Поэтому в данном случае, на мой взгляд, что происходит сейчас, будет приводить к активному вытеснению всей этой активности за пределы границ, а у нас рядом
still we have next to us Belarus, which is quite optimistic, crypto-optimistic. Let's leave the national risk, the sovereign risk aside, and Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan that are optimistic are also, and we have Armenia, and we have potential competitors, and there are European nations also. So it's my firm belief that the legal regulation should not be a handicap to the economic development, and what we're seeing today has no economic rationale. Those crowdfunding platforms without cryptocurrencies and crypto opportunities would mean the light versions of the stock market. And today, with the help of central bank, the entry to the stock market is so easy that the boundary between crowdfunding and stock bonds or floated bonds is now being erased, and we stop realizing why we need the digital component unless we're ready to move into the territory of the crypto optimism. Thank you. What is you represent one of the key departments of the financial university, and the World Bank that looks into crypto investment and digital investments thoroughly said that it would be 96 billion of turnover globally of worldwide, and China would account for half of that. What is your forecast, and whether you think that this crowdfunding will have any considerable meaning for the Russian Federation? As far as I know, now the numbers are much lower, no more than 10 billion. For the global economy, it's almost nothing. Peanuts. And it is probably a market with a potential, but still at an early stage. I'd like to distinguish between two things. The first is technology. And today, banks and other financial institutions have communication instruments that allow to work with money quicker and at a higher scale, at a greater scale. Peer-to-peer lending would be one of the mechanisms, and the Flow platform is the manifestation of the peer-to-peer lending, and that will see the development in future. It will keep revolutionizing. It will have a deserving place at the end of the day as people that would be ready to participate in the peer-to-peer schemes. There'll be a certain number of these people, but there's a huge number of people that are not ready to invest, and probably those who would be ready to invest in peer-to-peer would be quite thin on the ground, but it's going to be a small segment of the market probably. But there is another component to that, another pillar, which is about the economy by and large. It seems to many of us that once the startups appear, it was upon their free will, but no, it is the requirement of the economy. If we look at the business entities and those who earn money, we may infer that they start undergoing digital transformation one by one. And the innovative development that was a tiny proportion in the past, like with works and factories having R&D divisions, but still now this innovative component starts growing, and the proportion has become much larger, and the companies and businesses have to undergo continuous change, and all those tools for innovation that organizations have are insufficient. They are lacking the capacity. This is why we're seeing the startup development. Those R&Ds are now outsourced, because major companies and technology companies and non-technology companies cannot do it on their own. And we see that IT companies sometimes lose to startups like WhatsApp, kind of outpaced Facebook, and at the end of the day, Facebook had to pay $20 billion to buy this startup. Now we're seeing a unique landscape, and that will move in this vein. When we speak about the financial component, the crowdfunding is a major support to startups. On platforms we have a mishmash, a motley horde of different participants. But when we believe that, when we see a company that needs operational funding and others need funding for venture investments, the latter one being quite important for the government and the central bank in terms of regulation, as in the event that we put it on hold, we will see the innovative development of our economy frozen. Well, cryptocurrencies are another important part of that, but anyway, it is one of the important mechanisms to be tweaked. If we lend them a helping hand with the help of the government, we will be able to see rapid innovative development of our economy. And in this case, we will be quite more successful in terms of national economic development.
Kirill Kosminsky, as far as I understand, the Crowd Investment Platform Association and Crowdfunding Association emerged 2017. When the issue was under the purview of the central bank. I'm not sure how many members of your associations were in the list of those lucky 9. What are the major trends? What are the major area of development of the market right now? 5 minutes, please. Keep to the time because we are just getting out of our timing. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I'm going to start with the trends. The reason why the crowd financing emerged. 3 major factors do exist. This is the easy business model, simplified business model compared with the traditional institutions which give loans. If we take everything extra from the bank, when we don't have any regulation in place, actually, and we can live without many departments in place. So we have the risk assessment and the investment cooperation. And we are operating through the current account of the bank. It's very cheap, and this is the case. This is the innovations. The costs are low. And the second component, the key rates, in terms of deposits, in many Western countries, this is around 1%, even less. So the investors can get 5%. So minus the default risk, 4.5% on average. And the third factor in place, those who need money, not only micro and small businesses, but those who restructure their mortgage payments and get the tuition fee loans, which are huge segment of the market in the United States. There is a lending club in place, offered IPO, and there is a huge demand for the funds and finance, which are not possible and are not accessible in the banks. These are 3 major factors which do exist in Russia, but there is an obstacle, the low awareness of what crowdfunding is about and where we need to go to apply for that. The major platform includes 10,000 investors. Is just drop in the sea. How many profiles do we have in the Moscow Stock Exchange? This is about trends. What we need to do. Crowd lending allows for the investment in the real business, as our colleague has mentioned already, from Estonia and Latvia. This is a win-win situation for the state, for the investor who gets better return. So let's think about the tax rebate for the investors to go into this platform. Crowdfunding is an emotional component as well. We shouldn't forget about that. This proves the current situation, and this is proved by the analysis of the Potok company. When people look into very interesting tools, they are not interested in deposits at 4.5 to 5% return. They are interested in a higher rate of return, and they do understand that they invest in the real business. In addition to that, this is a very promising development, what can be seen within these 2 to 3 years to come. This is so-called tokenizations. When there is a cafe, open another outlet. So, and the coffee, not for 150 rubles, but for 100 rubles for those who have invested in before in the capexes of these coffee retail, and the agriculture, in industrial sector. So the tokenization issue is very important in this respect. Another point is to increase the awareness on the market. And the last point, the investments and startups. In Russia, this segment is at an infant stage. There are a number of platforms. Star Trek is the most famous out of them. This is a huge segment, and this is This is the segment of the market which could have been supported by the state through investing and developing the sandbox, the digital sandbox, through special publicity campaigns. And the structures for SMEs. Through our joint effort, we could find startups, we could find investments through crowd investment and developing this area in Russia. Thank you very much for your input. You have mentioned StarTrack project. They have the anchor clients, anchor investments, raising finance through 2 to 3, even 5 rounds when the companies raise money for the personal development or for the working capital inside their companies. This is the tool which demonstrates high return, high efficiency. The investor rights can be protected when this is the case and what is regulated. Alexei, a couple of minutes without presentation, if it is possible. The practical question to you: how does this new regulation have impact on the investor rights protection? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, dear participants. To be brief, undoubtedly, the investment, crowd investment, including, is a high venture endeavor, as the colleagues have mentioned already. But it is very important to mention that the new law and the legal framework allows to provide for the protection of those investors, to have a kind of reimbursement guarantee. So the person who attracts the investment, who raises the investment, should comply with particular requirements stipulated in the law, which are quite clear. And the investor should comply with the requirements. Apart from that, these requirements should be complied with by the operator of the investment platform in the investment platform itself. If it is not the case, the investor suffering the losses can protect the rights through suing, legal claim for damages. In some cases, it is important to mention that the law on the crowd investment allows the contracts, for example, the contract to assist in investment or to raise finance signed between the investor and the platform and those who raise the investment, is a special type of the contract which allows the participants of the markets high level of guarantees compared with the traditional one. Arseny, another question to you. Very brief question. How do you see the future? How do you assess the crowdfinancing development in the future? May I have the presentation, please? 2 slides maximum. There is one obstacle. First of all, which I have mentioned during our session. So we have absolutely different definitions of crowd lending, crowd finance, and crowd financing. We don't understand what they are all about. May I have the presentation on the screen, please? In 2017, there was a boom for cryptocurrencies, of COs, and my team, my previous team, the Russian Association of Cryptocurrencies and Blockchain, proposed the first crowd investment law jointly with Anatoly, and after that the central bank tapped into the game and offered their own law. So what is the main nature of that? We have crowdfunding. This is the investment. There are some technical issues with the presentations, unfortunately. Yeah, I need to get hold of the clicker. What do we have in Russia and what is legal? Crowd lending, when we give money as a loan, this is a consumer loan, mortgage loan, This is a low-risky asset, low-risky loan. And this is very important. As a rule, there are no innovative companies. There are big beasts on the market which just need to raise some money for a period of time. Crowd investing. This is the case. The best projects are located here and in crowdfunding. Crowdfunding has no legal framework at all, and the biggest platforms in Russia do not undergo this current law, but the current legal framework is not about crowdfunding, it is about crowd investing. So crowdfunding is a case when great guys invest in 200 millions in different projects, and it was sold for 2 billion to Facebook. Unfortunately, we're out of our timing. We have more than 3,000 audience. That's great. So we're very thankful to our audience, to our speakers for being with us. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time.